Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Giri Bharadhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Giri Bharadhari Yasodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yasodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Banachari Yamuna Tira Banachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Paramahansa Padavajikacharya Stottras of the Sri Shimala's Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai ISKCON BBD Founder Charya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai Go Premanandi Hari Hari Bo Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So, reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd Canto, Chapter 17, Text 1. Maitreya Uvacha Nisamyatma Bhuvagitam Nisamyatma Bhuvagitam Karnam Sankhayojitaha Karnam Sankhayojitaha Tata Sarvenya Vartanta Tata Sarvenya Vartanta Tridvidvaya Dvikoshayaha Shri Divaya Divokosha. Actually, it's Divokasha. Sorry. Maitreya Uvacha Nisamyatma Bhuvagitam Karanam Sankayojitaha Tatsarvenya Vartanta Shri Divaya Divakasha. Vaishnavis? Maitreya, the sage Maitreya, Uvacha said, Nisamya, upon hearing, Atmabhava, so, yeah, I got it, Atmabhuva, by Brahma, Gitam, explanation, Karanam, the cause, Sankaya, from fear, Ujita, freed, Tataha, then, Sarve, all, Yavartanta, returned, Tridivaya, to the heavenly planets, Diva Okashaha, Diva Okashaha, the demigods who inhabit the higher planets. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Sri Maitreya said, the demigods, the inhabitants of the higher planets, were freed from all fear upon hearing the cause of the darkness explained by Brahma, who was born from Vishnu. Thus they all returned to their respective planets. Purport. The demigods, who are denizens of higher planets, are also very much afraid of incidents such as the universe's becoming dark, and so they consulted Brahma. This indicates that the quality of fear exists for every living entity in the material world. The four principal activities of material existence are eating, sleeping, fearing, and mating. The fear element exists also in the demigods. On every planet, even in the higher planetary systems, including the moon and the sun, as well as on this earth, the same principles of animal life exist. Otherwise, why are the demigods also afraid of the darkness? The difference between the demigods and the ordinary human beings is that the demigods approach authority, whereas the inhabitants of this earth defy authority. If people would only approach the authority, then every adverse condition in this universe could be rectified. Arjuna was also disturbed on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, but he approached the authority, Krishna, and his problem was solved. The conclusive instruction of this incident is that we may be disturbed by some material condition, but if we approach the authority who can actually explain the matter, then our problem is solved. The demigods approached Brahma for the meaning of the disturbance, and after hearing from him, they were satisfied and returned home peacefully. Om Aganatam Dasya Jananjana Shalakaya Chakshuran Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Upakadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam. So, it's making the point here that if we approach the authority, the problems will be solved by hearing from the authority. Of course, here in this particular instance, the demigods, they heard from Brahma, and of course that's beneficial. Just like, for instance, say somebody's suffering from some problem with their health. They don't have a clue what it is, they just know they're suffering. And there's two people in this situation. Okay, so one of them goes to the doctor, and he gets diagnosed, and the doctor prescribes some treatment. So at least he knows what's going on. Whereas the other one has got the suffering, and he's experiencing all sorts of anxiety as well, because what's wrong with me? I don't know, So, it's at least if you know what's wrong, you know what the problem is, that's something. Same thing with a legal problem. Now, but in this particular case, the demigods are getting more than information. They're getting information from Lord Brahma as to what's the cause of darkness. But in the previous verse, it does say, Lord Brahma says, thus the most ancient person, the personality of Godhead, will alone come to our rescue. That's significant. In other words, they're not just having the situation explained to them, well, this is why it's getting dark, because the two demons are being born, but they're getting assurance from Brahma that Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is going to come to their rescue. So that's significant there. And then he goes on to say, Lord Brahma goes on to say, what purpose can we serve on his behalf by deliberating on the subject? In other words, don't be mental. Don't worry about it. This is what's happening. Don't get all mental about the whole thing. Krishna's going to save us. Okay? So that's an important point. And they were, because they're the demigods. They're not the, like explained in today's purport, there's the two divisions of people. There's the people who believe in what they're hearing from the authorities, and people who either don't believe or don't bother to consult. So the position of a devotee is he believes, he has faith in the words of an authority, and therefore he's more peaceful, and ultimately he's rescued. Like there's that famous story about, well, a statement that's going to illustrate this point is that famous saying, Rake Krishna Madeke, Made Krishna Rakeke. If Krishna wants to save somebody, nobody can kill them. And if Krishna wants to kill somebody, nobody can save them. And the classic illustration of this, Prabhupada, I've heard him, he narrated this story many times in classes he gave, was that when Ravana was a devotee, actually, of Lord Shiva. Sometimes we tend to think of the asuras or demons as like some grotesque-looking creature with, big fangs and like, not necessarily. Prabhupada explained in lectures that a demon could be very handsome and good, intelligent and etc. As Ravana was, he was actually a Vedic scholar, and he had a lot of things going for him, right? But his one fatal flaw was that he disregarded Ram. He was too puffed up, and he disregarded or couldn't appreciate who Ram was. So anyway, so he was at first when Ram went to rescue Sita and he was being attacked, he didn't think it very significant, because even back when he was, as I mentioned, he was a devotee of Lord Shiva, and he got benedictions from Lord Shiva. And when he was asking for benedictions, it's something very similar to Hiranyakasipu asking benedictions from Lord Brahma. Ravana didn't ask to be protected against human beings. He considered human beings so insignificant that he didn't even bother to ask Lord Shiva for the benediction, please protect me, don't let me be killed by any human being, something to that effect, because he just considered, well, not even necessary, it's petty and like that. So and Ram, of course, is in the role of a human being. So anyway, so when he was first being attacked by Ram and all the Vanaras, the army of, they're not monkeys, they're monkey-like humans that were attacking, he didn't consider it very, but then it got serious. And he realized as the battle wore on, he realized things are getting serious here. It's not going the way I thought it was going to go. These guys are a bit more formidable than what I thought. So he started praying to Lord Shiva, because he was a devotee of Lord Shiva. He was actually a big devotee of Lord Shiva. And so meantime, Lord Shiva's there, and in his abode or wherever, and he's there with his wife, and he's, the prayers are coming in, and somehow or another his wife was aware that, hey, your devotee is praying to you. Aren't you going to go help him? And because she could see he wasn't doing anything, he wasn't. So he goes, no. He says, why? He says, no, he's offended Lord Ram. There's nothing I could do. And I think that's where that verse comes from. Rake Krishna Madeke, Made Krishna Rakeke. He explained to her that no, if Ram wants to kill somebody, nobody could protect him. If Ram wants to save somebody, nobody could kill him like that. So that's a classic example of that story. Another example, pastime that sort of illustrates this point about the supreme position. What's it called when somebody can do anything? The supreme position of the personality of God is that pastime where Lord Balaram. Lord Balaram didn't want to get involved in the Battle of Kurukshetra, so he went on a pilgrimage just to, avoid the whole thing. And at one point on his pilgrimage, he wound up in Naimisharanya, and all the sages were there, and they were performing the, sacrifice, like that is described in the Bhagavatam. So Lord Balaram's coming in, and they're all there, all the sages and everything, and they see Lord Balaram, and they all stand up. They all stand up and offer respects, except for one person. It just so happened that one person happened to be the person who was selected to be on the Vyasasana, to be the spokesman, the speaker. And that was Romaharshan Sutta. So if there is a Vedic injunction that the person who's on the Vyasasana doesn't stand up. That's there. But at the same time, all these sages, they stood up. Because they weren't on the Vyasasana. And it's not, when the Supreme Personality of Godhead shows up, that sort of supersedes a lot of other things. And there's a hierarchy, even among Vedic injunctions. So within that hierarchy, if the Supreme Personality of Godhead stands up, despite the fact that there is a Vedic injunction that the person who's sitting on the Vyasasana doesn't have to stand up, you stand up, right? But he didn't. He didn't. And Balaram was thinking to himself, this guy's puffed up. And then because of that incident, it's described in the Krishna book that he remembered his birth. He was from a pratiloma birth. There's pratiloma and there's anuloma. See, anuloma birth is when the man is of a higher caste than the woman. See, so the father is a brahmana and the wife is a kshatriya. Then the other one is pratiloma when the wife, the woman, is a brahmana and the husband is a kshatriya. That's considered kind of low. That's kind of considered a bit degraded. It's not as good as an anuloma or somebody being married to an equal caste. So and it's kind of a disqualification. So Lord Balaram remembered that, and he was thinking that he's not standing up. He's from a pratiloma family, pratiloma birth. It's kind of lower birth. Here's all these sages in the assembly here. They're all qualified. They're not from that category. These are qualified sages here. So he's not equal to them, but somehow or another he's sitting on the seat, and he's not being humble. And then Lord Balaram thought, well, it's my mission to Paritranaya sadhanam vinishaya chadushkritam dharma samstapanartaya sambhavama yuge yuge, in order to deliver the pious, annihilate the miscreants, people who are falsely posing themselves like as leaders, etc., without the proper qualifications. This is part of my mission to not get rid of these people. So he decided, okay, I'm going to take them out. And he did. Lord Balaram just took a piece of kusa grass and he just touched it to his head. He just touched it to his head and that was it. Romaharshan Sutta, he didn't chop off his head, he just touched it to his head. Right, he touched it to his head and that was it, he was dead. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I'm getting Archita's confirmation there in the back. So then now the sages, they were like, what happened? What's going on here? Because they were like aghast at first because Lord Balaram didn't know this, but they had installed Romaharshan Sutta on that seat and they had given him benedictions. They had given him benediction of long life, power of the senses, something else like that. They really kind of set him right up there despite the fact that he was from this pratiloma. They chose him to be the spokesman. So they were kind of like, Lord Balaram, what have you done? He was sitting on the Vyasasana and we installed him in. And Lord Balaram was, because Krishna's Namo Brahmanya Devaya Go Brahmanya Tachi. He's particularly partial to the Brahmins and the cows. So he was very sympathetic, to their disturbance. And he said, oh, sorry, I didn't know. I didn't realize it. He said, what do you want me to do? Do you want me to counteract? Do you want me to bring him back to life? And they said, no, that's okay. Look, you saw fit to kill him, so, we respect that. If you're the Supreme Personality of God. If you thought he should be killed, what do we know, So leave it intact. And he said, well, but what, And he said, well, could you do something? It's because people are going to be confused by this, why you're killing a Brahmin. So could you do something to atone? We think that might be a good idea for posterity. And he said, yeah, sure. He said, what? He said, well, you choose. We don't want to recommend what you should do. You choose some suitable atonement because that'll be you're the most intelligent. You know best what to do in this situation. So Balaram thought, okay, yeah. And he said, okay. And Prabhupada says he came up with a solution, what's the word he used? Suitable for his position. Prabhupada said it better, but anyway. He decided that, okay, well, the sun, it says in the Vedic literatures that the sun is the representative, or is almost identical with the Father. You know, the Son is like the Father reborn. There's some statement like that, pretty powerful statement about how the Son and the Father are very closely related. So Lord Balaram decided that we will transfer all the blessings, all the benedictions that were given to Romaharshan Sutta to his son, Ugashrava Sutta. And they made him the spokesman, the person to recite the Bhagavatam, and they gave him the benediction of the long life and power of the senses, etc. And so the sages were they were very pleased by that. They thought that was a very judicious and sagacious sort of a solution to the whole problem. So anyway, so in the Krishna book, Prabhupada says, he kind of gives like a little purport to this whole event, and Prabhupada says, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is free to act in any way. That's an important point to remember. And that's why the Supreme Personality of Godhead is free to act in any way. So, and it goes on. Although his killing Romaharshan Sutta may be considered imperfect, he, meaning Balaram, could immediately counteract it with greater profit to all. Therefore, one should not imitate the actions of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One should simply follow the instructions of the Lord. All the great learned sages present realized that although they considered the action of Lord Balaram improper, they could understand that the Lord was immediately able to compensate with greater profit. See, so that's an important thing to always remember, that two things. One, Krishna's free to act in any way, and he's immediately able to counteract with greater profit to all. So notice, Krishna can save anybody in any situation at any time, because he's completely free to act, and he can, and as it says here, he can immediately counteract with greater profit. So, so these, you know, today we're hearing about how the demigods, when they heard that Lord Brahma told them that they're going to be rescued by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, they were peaceful. Why? Because they had faith, they had conviction that this is the case. You know, that, yeah, okay, if Lord Brahma says Krishna's going to rescue us, game over. You know, it's it. We're all set. Because, you know, Rake Krishna Madheke, Madhe Krishna Rake. If Krishna is going to save us, we're going to be saved. We have confidence in that, because they have faith in this idea that he can counteract with greater profit to all. And that's, of course, what eventually what we're going to hear is going to happen. You know, as this pastime unfolds, Prahlad Maharaj and all these different things, Lord Nrsingadev, so Krishna does compensate with greater profit to the whole universe, and for, you know, generations to come, or what's the proper way to say, for generations of people to come, by this, giving us this pastime and the appearance of Lord Nrsingadev. But so this is an important point, and when you engage in devotional service, you experience this, you know, to some degree. I mean, Krishna says, "Yaya tamam papajante mam tam sataiva bhajamyam." As they surrender unto me, I reward them accordingly. So devotional service, engaging in devotional service, gives the devotee an opportunity to experience this point, how Krishna can counteract with greater profit to all immediately, you know. And like, for instance, my service is book distribution. And Pat, I'll be honest with you, I feel like I experience this almost on a regular daily basis. Because you go out there, and there's different factors that you're dealing with. Your own mind and senses, the place, the people that you're dealing with, the weather, authorities, so many different things. And sometimes it just seems totally hopeless and futile. It just seems like, forget it. There's absolutely no way. Considering how I feel today, physically, mentally, what's going on at this place, how these people are responding to me, there's no possible way that I could, that I could have a good day today. Actually, at least to my mind, it seems like there's no possible way that I could even do anything. I mean, this is going to be a total disaster today. You know, that's the message I'm getting from my mind and senses. But then, you know, the intelligence, fortunately, by Prabhupada's mercy, kicks in, and I remind myself, no, wait, you know, Krishna's in control. Krishna, you're not in control. Those are factors, but they're not the ultimate determining factor. The ultimate determining factor is the unconstrained will of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That's the ultimate determining factor, you see? So by Krishna's and Prabhupada's mercy, you remember that, and then you start take shelter. You dig it, you pray. You start praying for the mercy. You pray for the mercy of your spiritual master. You pray for the mercy of the predecessor acharyas. You pray for the mercy of the 6 Goswamis, like that, and then you just keep going. And then lo and behold, everything changes. Everything changes. People start stopping. They take the books. They give a nice donation. You start feeling differently. You start feeling alive, and you start chanting in between people, and you start experiencing even a taste for the chanting, and it's like, boom! It's a whole different experience. It's like night to day difference. You're going from not day to night, but night to day. It's like night, and then by just making that decision to take shelter of the internal potency, in the form of chanting and praying for the mercy and continuing your service, everything changes. See, so when you experience that, you realize what's being said here. You realize, yeah, it's true. It's true. Yeah, Krishna can immediately counteract with greater profit to all any situation. You see? So it's like, and it really gives you, it's an important thing because it gives you faith that what we're hearing in these books and this philosophy, it's not just a collection of ancient stories and myths, but it's accurate. It's information that's accurate, and it's a valuable treasury of wisdom and truth. That's what we're dealing with here. You see, because pratyakshavagamam dharmyam sushishkam kartam aviyam. The 9th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, it says this knowledge is the king of education. It's the most secret of secrets, and it gives direct perception of the truth by realization. Pratyakshavagamam dharmyam sushikam kartam aviyam, and it's very joyfully performed. See, so when you engage in devotional service, when you actually stick your neck out, and do it, put yourself in that position where, okay, I'm being asked to do this. How am I going to do this? I got to do it, so let me try. And you try and you pray, and then you experience something like this happening, and it gives you that sort of faith that, oh yeah, as I said, it's not just a collection of ancient stories and myths. This is a valuable treasury of wisdom and truth that we're dealing with. And so that's important, That's an important realization. Now, here's the thing though. It doesn't always happen. It's not like devotees don't have any problems in life. I mean, despite the fact that, it is true, yet, Krishna can immediately counteract with greater profit to any situation. Sometimes devotees experience adversities, right? They experience trials, tribulations, problems, difficulties in our lives. So how do we understand that? Well, that was explained in the previous purport. Prabhupada says here, the Pandavas, who were direct friends of Krishna, lost their kingdom, their wife was insulted, they had to undergo many severe tribulations. Seeing all these reverses, okay, here's the general understanding. Seeing all these reverses affect devotees, one should not be disturbed. See, so in other words, reverses will affect devotees. But Prabhupada is saying one should not be disturbed. One should simply understand that in these matters there must be some plan of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Bhagavatam's conclusion is that a devotee is never disturbed by such reverses. He accepts even reverse conditions as the grace of the Lord. One who continues to serve the Lord, even in reverse conditions, is assured that he will go back to Godhead, back to the Vaikuntha planets. Lord Brahma assured the demigods that there was no use in talking about how the disturbing situation of darkness was taking place, since the actual fact was that it was ordered by the Supreme Lord. Brahma knew this because he was a great devotee. It was possible for him to understand the plan of the Lord. So the point is that okay, what I said is true. I didn't make it up. Sometimes you experience this like immediate reciprocation or from Krishna, but sometimes we see devotees experience adverse conditions for sometimes days, years on end. But we have to maintain our faith that there's a plan. There's a plan, and Krishna's got something beneficial in store. And this is discussed elsewhere in the Bhagavatam. There's in the chapter of Bhishma Dev's passing away, there's a couple nice verses which I'd like to share with everybody. So Bhishmadev is talking with the Pandavas. The Pandavas came to see Bhishmadev when he was lying there on the bed of arrows, preparing to leave his body. And so they showed up, and Bhishmadev was, initially he was kind of lamenting at how the Pandavas had to suffer. So this is some of the few things he said, and he kind of concludes it, solves his own, his own, I would say, he solves the problem of the misgivings he's having himself, He says, okay, Bhishmadev said, "Oh, what terrible sufferings and what terrible injustices you good souls suffer for being the sons of religion personified. You did not deserve to remain alive under those tribulations, but you were protected by the Brahmins, God, and religion." He goes on. "As far as my daughter-in-law Kunti is concerned, upon the great General Pandu's death, she became a widow with many children, and therefore she suffered greatly. And when you were grown up, she suffered a great deal also because of your actions." So he's addressing the Pandavas here. And he goes, "In my opinion, this is all due to inevitable time, under whose control every planet is carried, just as the clouds are carried by the wind." And I'm going to just skip one verse. And so he concludes, he says, "O king, no one can know the plan of the Lord. Even though great philosophers inquire exhaustively, they are bewildered." So that's his conclusion. Nobody could really understand what Krishna's got in mind, but we did get a clue from today's purport or yesterday's purport that because Brahma was a great devotee, he could understand. See? But generally speaking, people they're not going to be able to do it. They're not going to be able to understand. Prabhupada says in the purport to that, he says, since time Brahma wanted to impress upon Maharaj Yudhisthira that since time immemorial, no one, including such demigods as Shiva and Brahma, could ascertain the real plan of the Lord. So what can we understand about it? It is useless also to inquire about it. Even the exhaustive philosophical inquiries of sages cannot ascertain the plan of the Lord. The best policy, here's the practical advice, the best policy is to simply abide by the orders of the Lord without argument. The sufferings of the Pandavas were never due to their past deeds. The Lord had to execute the plan. Now here's Prabhupada. He's kind of like, he's just got finished saying nobody could understand the plan of the Lord, but now he's explaining the plan of the Lord to us because he's a confidential devotee like Brahma, so he's giving us insight into it, despite the fact that he just finished supporting Bhishmadev's statement that nobody could understand the plan of the Lord. But here's the plan of the Lord. It said that the Lord had to execute the plan of establishing the kingdom of virtue, and therefore his own devotees suffered temporarily in order to establish the conquest of virtue. So that's, in a nutshell, that's it. So the idea is this, that Krishna's got some plan. It's ultimately, it's for the benefit of every living entity, and certainly for the benefit of his devotees. And when we are faced with adversities, here in the material world, which we will inevitably will be, if you do a graph of, as you get older, the likelihood that you're going to get sick and die, the graph would look something like this. At a young age, it's kind of like very little, but as you get older, it goes like that, until you hit 120 and it's right up there, because practically nobody lives beyond that. The oldest person alive is like 116 now or something like that. So, it's inevitable that these things are going to come, or we're going to be faced with these adverse conditions. But the point is that there's a plan behind it. And that plan is that Krishna is reforming. He's reforming all the souls. The devotees are in the fast lane. Okay, just like when you're on the highway. Devotees are in the carpool lane, and we're just zipping along, despite the fact that there's all that traffic over there is blocked up. But Krishna is acting in such a way that all living entities are, he's trying to help all living entities progress towards going back to Godhead. In the 8th canto, I think it's 3rd chapter, text 17, it says, only Krishna can deliver us from this material existence. Indeed, he is always trying to do so. Even before we offer our prayers to him, Krishna's always looking for the opportunity to. He's never lazy in this regard. You see? He's and like that. So Prabhupada's pointing out that Krishna's trying to help all living entities, progress towards going back to God. What to speak of devotees? So that's what's going on. That's what devotees have to, we have to bear in mind, that when these things happen, they might not, maybe if we're fortunate, there might be some immediate reciprocation for Krishna to counteract a situation, but maybe not, but that's okay. Just, we have to, maintain that faith and conviction that this is ultimately for my benefit. Krishna's he's doing what he needs to do to purify me, to qualify, to help me get qualified, to get out of this material world altogether, and to go back to the spiritual world and be there, live eternally with him in the spiritual world in my original constitutional position. So I'll stop there. Does anybody have any question? Yeah. Wait, did you have your hand up, Marge? Did you have a question? Okay, sorry. Okay.
Thank you for the class, Prabhu. I was wondering about the Pratiloma birth, because it seems interesting that Balaram would take such serious note of that when, we learn from Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, and we learn from the acharyas representing the different forms of the Lord, including Balaram, that these external designations are quite superfluous to the actual qualification of an individual and their real character. So it seems a little bit of a diversion from how we normally gauge the quality of a person, or the qualification, or the condemnation that a person deserves based off of the birth. It seems different than how we normally hear it.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. That's a valid point. And I would be even more, I would be more concerned about that if what happened was that Balaram came into the assembly and Brahmaharshan Sutta stood up. Imagine if he did stand up to offer respects, and then Balaram, remembering that he was from a Pratiloma birth, then I'd really be thinking, whoa, that's pretty extreme. But it was a combination of factors. In other words, that wasn't the only factor. That wasn't the only reason why Balaram decided to do that. He did also not, like everybody else in the whole assembly, didn't stand up to offer respects. That's Archit wants to make an additional comment on this point, right? Okay.
I would add something to your response to this.
Okay.
Did you have a question?
No, I wanted to add something to
Okay. And remember the question. Yeah, at the moment I can't remember the question, so I'll wait till Archit finishes. Maybe
Yes, ultimately we learn from the scriptures that everybody's spirit, soul, even in the animal kingdom, and externals are just that, externals. But the externals are not by accident. Whatever external factors you're living with now are not an accident. It's what you deserve. And it does indicate where you're coming from. So much so that in the Manu Samhita, there's reference to when a man wants to get married, to look at the external features of the woman that he's supposed to marry. And they indicate something, like if a woman with ugly feet, you shouldn't marry. It says that. Imagine that. You think, we're on a spiritual path. What difference does it make, her external appearance? But it does say that in the Manu Samhita, that if a woman has ugly feet, you shouldn't marry her. So the external appearance that we have is not an accident. It's by karmana daivanaitrena. You get a particular body from a particular set of parents. It's not an accident. And those external features do indicate something.
They reflect.
They reflect, and therefore the Mahapurushas, it's described what their external features are. The length of their limbs and that, various indicators of a Mahapurusha. So similarly, external indicators to everybody, they do indicate something. But you can rise beyond that. It's not that if you're a woman with ugly feet that you can't make progress in life, or if you have a particular set of eyes or hair or whatever, that you can't make progress in. Everybody can make progress, especially in this age. But those indicators were even more important in previous ages, because things were more in order, you see? Now everything's mixed up. So you may find somebody with some negative external indicators who's actually a great soul. But in previous ages, it was more to the point, you know what I mean? If somebody had a particular set of external indicators, it showed their character. It was more in line. Now in Kali Yuga, everything's mixed up. So we don't take it so seriously. But in any age, you shouldn't take it seriously. There are so many stories, like from the Mahabharata, about those tiny sages. I forget their name. Do you remember their names? They were very, very tiny, and it was easier to make fun of them. But it was particularly stated that if you make fun of any sage, but particularly these little sages, I forget their names, you would be condemned. You would be condemned. So we have to also halt our initial reaction, or if we're mistrained, our initial reaction to make fun of somebody or look down on them because of those external indicators. We are being trained to see Vidya Banaya Sampane Brahmane Gabihastani. No matter what the external indicator is, even the body type, animal, whatever, there's a soul there, super soul is there. Give respect. Go on.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great add-on. Thank you. Do you remember your question, Mark?
Something very depressing or devastating appears to have happened. Darkness has come over the whole atmosphere, and the demigods are very upset. They're very disturbed. They're speculating as to what's going on, what's happening, why is this happening, and there is anxiety. And I forgot who it was said that the Lord has a plan. So what are you worried about? The Lord can only do good. Even sometimes if it appears bad, he can only do good because his very nature is goodness. So I just have one question. What is, could you give us, what is the plan that the Lord has, which is making, causing someone to say, don't worry about it, it's a good plan. So would you like to?
Yeah, that's kind of very, very briefly touched upon in the class. His plan is that he's going to use this as an opportunity to glorify his pure devotee Prahlad Maharaj, and he can also use this whole situation as an opportunity to appear as Lord Nrsimhadev. And, that now we'll have that pastime, devotees will have that pastime till the end of the material universe, just to remember and like that. So, there's those two things.
Okay, I would like to add something to that, if I may. The plan was primarily, and it's mentioned several times in this chapter, that the Lord likes to fight. He enjoys fighting not out of hatred or vengeance or contempt or condescension. He likes it as a sport. And many children you see, they're growing up, they like to do wrestling and judo and things of that sort. So the Lord had a plan, and the plan was that he wanted to fight with devotees. But those devotees have turned into demons, unfortunately. They're called Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu, and they were originally Jaya and Vijay. So the Lord, it's mentioned by Prabhupada, doesn't fight with anyone but devotees. So although they've turned into demons, but originally they were gods. They were actually persons who were the gatekeepers of the Lord's palace. So they weren't low class, they were really high class innately. And so the whole point is that the Lord wanted some good fighting partners. And the good fighting partners would be Hiranyaksha, who's one of the most powerful persons in the world, and his brother Hiranyakashipu. He was also fighting. So therefore, in that respect, the Lord set it up so that he would be able to fight with them, wrestle with them, call it what you want, but he would get the pleasure of fighting. And that's a pleasure. Anyone who likes to fight, but only for sport, not for hatred, there is a pleasure. Just as there's a pleasure in so many different skills. And just as speaking, as you are doing today, there's a certain pleasure, and if devotees are taking some information or some knowledge or some uncertainties put aside, and you see that the person is clear on something now, it gives you good feeling. So this is the point. The Lord wanted to fight, okay? So nobody should think that the Lord doesn't fight. But he fights with a person who's a demon, but who originally is a devotee.
John, thank you. Excellent comment. Enjoy Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.